The late Arthur Rubinstein, the great Polish-American classical pianist, was known to be the greatest interpreter of Chopin in his time. I remember doing a report on him when I was in high school. There is a particular recording of Rubinstein playing Chopin that is brilliant. It's not just the music, but it's also the jacket cover. The recording was originally made in 1965 when Rubinstein was still at his height. This newer recording is actually a remix of the 1965 recording, released again in 1981, about 1 year before he died at the age of 95. And the photo on the jacket cover captures the elderly Rubinstein deep in concentration with his hands at a keyboard, except the keyboard and the piano are non-existent. Rubinstein is pictured clad in shirt sleeves, sitting in his apartment with his hands outstretched over his coffee table, playing in the air what must have been like for him to play in a great concert hall somewhere in the world. In this cover photo, Rubinstein is absolutely engrossed in the music, which he no longer actually plays, but remembers and rehearses on his invisible piano. Here is a man near the end of his life who is content and who is at peace. In today's gospel from Matthew, we hear Jesus say, "The last will be first and the first will be last." If you are on top of your game, if you are privileged, if you have lots of power, you probably don't care to hear these words as good news. The last will be first. But if you are powerless or losing power, or if you live without privilege, or if your experience of life is already to be last or less, or if you have lost someone or something significant in life, a loved one, an ability, a skill, being attractive, being strong, agile, competent, healthy, desirable, then you will hear what Jesus is saying about the last becoming first as a welcomed invitation. You still belong. If we know someone who is losing their life because of diminishing health or increasing age, or because of some discrimination or other injustice they have experienced, then hearing Jesus say, "Whoever loses their life will gain it," these words of Jesus can be an enormous comfort. It will not take away the present pain or challenge or suffering, but it reminds us where Jesus stands. Comparisons can be hard to make. How things were in contrast to how things are, in contrast to how things are supposed to be, can at times be a lose-lose proposition. Comparing ourselves to others on whatever scale we choose can be futile and can at times be demeaning. Ranking yourself with yourself, how you were versus how you are, or ranking yourself in comparison to someone else may leave you either better or bitter. The wisdom of this 12-step program is very simple. Identify, don't compare. Identify differences and similarities in your own life experience with yourself and in your experience of others, but don't compare. Jesus was forever making comparisons in the parables he told. Are you like this, he would ask, or are you like that? If a comparison leaves dignity intact, yours or someone else's, if a comparison is enlightening, if it is liberating, if it is true, if it leaves you with a sense of gratitude, then the comparison may be a good thing. The word comparison comes from the Latin comparare. I hope you're taking notes on this one. And that means, of course, to liken, not to separate. Com, which means with or together, and par, which means equal. Comparing with an equal. Sometimes we talk about comparing notes, and we know how helpful that can be. Over the last couple of years, while I was working as the canon to the ordinary in the diocese, and working with the Learning Communities Initiative, I came to know a younger man, a professor from Luther Seminary in Minnesota, and a pastor of his own congregation up in St. Paul, Michael Binder. As I watched Michael work in the large groupings we had very often with the congregations we were working with, I thought, wow, I really admired him because he had a gift for the gospel. And he had a gift of making the gospel of Jesus accessible for others. And he had this sense, this wisdom, that the church could position itself to do its work better. There were times in this whole thing I was asked to present something. And I remember at first, I briefly thought, well, I can't measure up. I can't measure up to this guy in his 30s or 40s, Michael. But then I could, and I did. Not with his gifts or perspective, but with my own life and my own experience of God and my own working in the church. And I remember how one story at one point in time really moved Michael, and he carried it with him. You may have remembered hearing the story that the poet Joan Erickson tells, that life can be compared to a piece of embroidery. During the first half of life, we get sight of the right side of the embroidery. And during the second half of life, we look at the other side. The other side is not so pretty as the right side, but it is more instructive. It shows the way in which the threads have been worked together. You may have glimpses of the backside of the embroidery of your life, how it is you were intricately put together. Some days the backside of your life's embroidery may fill your screen. That perspective can be very fascinating. But it's really about the long view, embracing the embroidery of your life, both sides. In the gospel lesson appointed for today, Jesus leaves us with the story about the laborers who are hired, some for the full day of work, some for part of the day of work, and some for just the last hour. And they all receive the same pay. And he's pressed on that, and he doesn't get defensive about it. He kind of implies that this is the deal of life. Why was this story told by Jesus, and why was it remembered? Why did this story eventually find its way into the canon of scriptures? Undoubtedly because it rang true. where are you in that story? When in the day did you show up to work and got the pay, the equal pay? Why are those laborers? We are those laborers. We are all of them. We are the ones who showed up at the beginning of the day, and we are the ones who showed up when the day was half gone, and we are the ones who showed up the last hour. This is our story, all of it. And at the end of the day, God's invitation to us is to say yes. Yes to life. Yes to the terms we have been given, even with all the unknowns that are still yet before us. COVID-19, health concerns, depression, loneliness, finances, the changing terms of life. Some days they are terrific terms, and some days they're really tough. In the end, Jesus is with us. At the beginning of our lives, in the middle, maybe when we make adjustments and some other changes, and surely as we come to the end of our lives. Jesus is there, encouraging us to stay with it, to stay engaged in our lives. He is with us till the end. Amen.